What did it mean to be a soldier in the medieval Arab and Islamic world? What values were important? How was chivalry viewed? Was there even such thing as becoming a knight? Let's take a look. And welcome to the Golden Middle Age in our new series, The Arab Knights. In general, when discussing warfare and soldiers in the medieval world, what comes to mind straight away is the idea of chivalry, knighthood, a noble soldier in shining armour on his horse, charging into battle to defeat the enemy. And we have romanticised this image of medieval warfare, when actually it was one of the most brutal things. We can read through history about the horrors of war, especially in the medieval times, where they had some lethal weapons like axes, warhammers, which could crush skulls and cause so much damage. And therefore, if we dig deep into medieval warfare, it's not as romantic as we probably thought it was. Nevertheless, values were there, and soldiers more than often fought for causes. And of course, you had the odd mercenary here and there, but values were important. It gave the soldier meaning and purpose when going off to war. And this is something that was common in the medieval Arab and Islamic world. Jihad is the one word I'm going to mention for now. Jihad is one of the main aspects in the religion of Islam, and in the Middle Ages, it was important for anyone going to war. Jihad translates to a struggle, so whether you're struggling against yourself, against the enemy within you, or struggling for an external cause, it can be applied to many different things. Unfortunately though, it has negative connotations nowadays, but that's not our discussion for today. And as we mentioned, jihad meant struggle, and to struggle in the path of God. This was the foundation of a Muslim and Arab man when they were off to fight in a war. And going to war was holy, especially if it was against an external enemy. Because in the medieval era, we can say there was three main blocks or units, and they were Islam, Latin Christendom, Greek Christendom, and they often clashed with each other for political or religious reasons. So jihad would give you that sense of meaning and purpose, and you would want to aspire to be like the great martyrs in the religion of Islam. And the reason I say Islam is because most of the Arabs in the medieval times followed the religion of Islam. They had great examples to look up to when going to war, whether it was Hamza, the uncle of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who was martyred in one of the famous battles in Uhud, or Ali ibn Abi Talib, the cousin and son-in-law of the Prophet, who is regarded as the greatest warrior the Arabs and Muslims ever saw, or even Hussein ibn Ali, the grandson of the Prophet, who was martyred in the Battle of Karbala, where he fought an army of 30,000 with only 72 soldiers. By giving these examples, it could give us an indication of how medieval Arabs would have probably viewed warfare and going into battle. If you had great examples like the ones mentioned before, it added more validity and commitment to your cause. The values going into warfare had to be in line with the example set by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. This would make your war holy and would allow you to enter paradise in their eyes. It can be said that this was an obligation and also an honor for an Arab Muslim man in the Middle Ages, especially given the fact that there was neighboring entities and power blocks. It almost became a clash of ideologies. The invading crusader, which the Arabs or Muslims referred to as the Franks, were a barbaric people in their eyes. They had to combat their crusade with the jihad in order to defend the land and holy sites, especially Jerusalem. And that's not to say that Arab or Muslim empires viewed the crusade as their first priority, because they were also busy fighting within themselves, as in Muslim against Muslim. Now, if we zoom out a bit and look at the Muslim rulers or emperors at the time, they probably used this to their political advantage rather than their loyalty to their religion. But we are focusing on your average medieval Arab soldier and how they would have been able to go through the horrors and hardships of war, motivated, strong, and fearless. And we've spoken about jihad, but what about knighthood? We all hear of European knighthood, where you start off as a squire and eventually become a knight, which is more of a lifestyle rather than just a position in war when going to battle. Did something similar exist in the medieval Arab and Islamic world? Well, to try and draw comparisons and similarities, we can potentially look at the Mamluk institution. Now, I'm not saying it's the medieval Islamic version of knighthood, rather it was a system and a way of life which emerged in the Middle Ages in that region. The Mamluk institution emerged in the 9th century under the Abbasid Empire, and what Mamluk translates to is to be owned by someone. And that's what they literally were. The Abbasids and many medieval Islamic empires after them utilized the Mamluks for their military campaigns. Mamluks were usually captured as boys, probably around the age of 10. They tended to be nomadic Turks in Central Asia or north of the Persian Empire. They would be captured and trained to be elite soldiers. Usually, there would be a cavalry force with bows and arrows, and they were all mostly Turks. And this could illustrate to us the diminishing presence of the Arab soldier, who can trace his lineage back to the Arabian Peninsula as we progress into the Middle Ages. But the Mamluks were taken and trained to become an elite force. They were not only just used for military purposes, which can show that becoming a Mamluk wasn't really a bad or humiliating thing. Even though you were owned and had a master or ustad, firstly, you were an elite military man. Secondly, they had many opportunities to become wealthy as they were close to the monarchy. They would serve as cupbearers, personal attendants, and would run errands for those high in the government, and they would also train their horses. This allowed them to become wealthy, hold high positions, and also become educated in Arabic and religion. And if you want a rags to riches story where the underdog comes on top, look at the Mamluks. Starting off as military slaves, they eventually defeated the Crusaders, the Mongols, and other medieval Islamic dynasties and established an empire of their own from about the 1200s up until the Ottomans came in and defeated them. I hope you can see why I used the Mamluk example to draw a rough comparison with the medieval European knights. It was similar in a way where they both started at the bottom and eventually started to rise in power. They were both elite cavalry forces on the battlefield and had high positions in society. And they also done tasks which were related to the government or the kingdom. And I'd say this is the closest thing we can get in the medieval Arab and Islamic world to European knights. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, do make sure you subscribe to the channel, you give us a thumbs up, and you can also leave a comment. And do stay tuned because this is only the first video on our series about the medieval Arab knight. We will see you again very soon.